Hey guys, I'm Joe, and this is a Bradford built fence. All right, so today we're here on site at a job that we just wrapped up. The guys just left. This was a 6-foot privacy fence that was existing that we tore out and replaced. This is a pine privacy. This is all dog ear on the sides, and up here on the front has the cap and trim here on the front gate. So this is the way it was before, and we just wanted to dress up this front section where you've got the cap and we got a box post here on the corner. This here is just a typical single gate. This is our wood gates with the typical wood frame and wood post. Something to note, on 6 foot tall, we'll always do 3 hinges for extra support. On 8 foot tall, you'd have a 4th. So on the hardware here with the hinges, we get asked sometimes, like, why do you got these different bolts here? And those are by design. It's all for the structure and support of the gate. These black screws that you see, these lag screws, are what come with these hinges, and they are like a 2-inch lag screw. So they penetrate that picket and go into the 2x4 behind, but just those can start to back out over time. So this bolt right here on the post side, so our hinge post is right behind here, that's a 5-inch lag that goes all the way back into the post. So it holds that all the way back 5 inches into the post. Then these two are actually carriage bolts. So here you got 2 and here you got 2 on the bottom that actually bolt all the way through the frame. And what that does is it's tying all that hinge, the picket, and the 2x4 all together. So you'll see a lot of times if you've just got those small lag screws in there, over time those are going to start to kind of pull apart and back out. And so that's going to create separation from your hinge there, and so your gate's going to start sagging and falling. So those bolts are very important there to secure that and give the gate longevity. Here, looking at the frame, so the support is a 6x6 hinge post. So that's our standard to do a bigger 6x6 hinge post, whereas on the 6-foot fence, the typical post would be a 4x4 like the latch. Then here on the framing, this is going to be our wood post, wood frame. We do have options of steel supports and even steel post, steel frames. You've got your diagonal here. Now your diagonal always needs to go from the bottom of your hinge side to the top of your latch side, because that is a compression brace, meaning as the gravity pushes down, as this is hanging, gravity pushes down, this is counteracting by forcing that back up or pushing that back up. If it was tension, like a wire or a cable, sometimes you'll see like a tension cable, it would be pulling up, so you would run it the opposite way. But with this, being a compression brace, you always want low hinge side, high latch side. That's kind of our gate setup. That's a typical 4 foot, 4.5 foot wide is a typical size you'd see on a wood gate like this. If you get wider than that, then you would want to be looking into some kind of steel reinforcement. But that's 4 foot, 4.5 is a great size for most things, like a wheelbarrow or lawnmower, to have access back here to your backyard. All right, so as we talked to the latch, there are spots here, actually on the front and the back side, where you could put a lock or carabiner, just something to keep it from being able to move. Now this is a good example on a single gate that swings out, which on single gates, that's probably 90% of them. But the way that we do this framing, the post on your latch side is actually gonna block that hole for that back hole for that lock. So if you are wanting to put a lock on the inside of this gate and not on the outside, now you can still put one on the outside, there's a separate hasp that we can put on the back side of your gate that would allow you to put a lock on there. But when you go, just to note, on a single gate that swings out, you go to put a lock, trying to put it on the inside, that is going to be blocked by that post there. Also, You may notice these blocks here. These are 2x4 pieces that we've got nailed to the latch post. So those are by design as well. So these are contact points at the top and the bottom. And what that does is, as we're swinging this gate closed, it's just giving it something to close up against. And so as this wood weathers and gets moisture and expands and contracts, it's going to prevent it from moving in or out by these contact boards right here. Another thing that this serves is, if you look at from the front here, this reveal between the gate and the fence it's right at 1 inch. So that is a common question of, well, why is there a gap here at my latch? And that is also by design. You would never want a gate to be like a 1/2 inch or honestly any closer than 1 inch to the fence here, because again, we're in a exterior environment, we're out in the elements. The wood is a natural product, so it's going to retain moisture and expand. It's going to dry out and shrink. So with that, you need some margin here to allow clearance for your latch. If it was any closer, as this wood moves and shifts, it's going to start to rub and hit and inhibit this from opening and closing correctly. So those contact blocks, the main purpose is to support that gate, but this also does provide some privacy, or blocking off the view between that gap there at the latch. All right, that concludes everything for the gate. Now let's go check out the framing and the picket orientation on the fence. All right, so here is part of the fence. You can see that the way this finished, they had the pickets facing out, or the finish side facing out. Now with this particular job, they were dealing with 4 different neighbors. So we're on the first side over here. So they shared this side with this neighbor. They shared the back run with 2 neighbors, and the other side with a neighbor. And we'll look at that of what was a little bit different over there as well. But in this case, the prior fence was oriented this way, with the pickets facing out on this side and on the back. So in order to preserve relationship with neighbors and be on property lines the way we needed to be, the best plan of action was to go back the way that it was before. But if you're looking at building a fence or having a fence built, this is something that you'll have to look at each time. So this is what would be pickets out if you were in here at your property. So that smooth side or picket side is going to be toward the outside. Then from the inside of your yard, you're going to be able to see this like we're standing here with the 2x4 rails and the post. This is a 4x4 post. It's a 4x4 treated post, set in concrete. There are other options for metal post upgrades and things to strengthen that. But here, looking at the framing, this would be a good thing to look at. So this is what we would call dog ear, which just has the top of the picket sticking up and has these dog ears. So we do this intentionally. Whenever after we've set our post and we come to run our 2x4s, we are running string lines to make sure that top line is running and flowing as good as it can. So you're always balancing a good flow at the top, because that's what your eye is going to see. But then also you've got variations in the ground, and you don't want to have huge gaps and being way down on the ground in different areas. So you're always walking that balance of trying to minimize the gaps at the bottom, but also have a really good flow, straight lines, real good flow on the top, because again, that's what your eye is going to see, and that's what you're gonna notice about it. So we do that through string lines, running string lines up top, and we set our top 2x4 in line with where we want that fence to go. And then from that top 2x4, we stay consistent. So if you see here, you got a consistent 3.5 inches from the top of this 2x4 to the top of the picket. And 3.5 is not just a random number. We found that is a great number. It gives a good reveal of the picket, but it's not too much. So honestly, you'll see some that will do like 6, 7, 8 inches of picket above this top rail. And honestly, especially with the pine, that tends to be a bad idea, because the more that you have exposed up here, that's the longer it's given a piece to warp. And so whenever you see that you've got 6, 7, 8 inches sticking up above your support here, those tops of those, as they weather, are gonna bow and banana, and so you look down that and all those picket tops are going all different directions, and that's because they don't have the proper support close enough to the end of the board. So in the same breath, we orient our bottom rail the same way, to never be more than 3.5 to 4 inches above the bottom of that picket. That way you've got support on both ends, and then you've got centered here, you've got your support in the middle, and that gives you the support you need to try to minimize as much of the bowing and warping and weathering that you can. Another note on the pickets, we always, so this was just finished, like this is a fresh fence, and they just finished putting these pickets up, but you can see we butt these pickets up together on each other, and so we get them as tight as we can. But again, this is a wood product, it's a natural product. With this pine, there's going to be a certain amount of moisture that's already in there from the treatment process, so you should expect this to dry and to separate. And sometimes you can see 1/8 inch up to 1/4 inch gaps between these as they dry. Now you may get, as weather cycles of wet and dry, they may expand slightly and then dry again, but you will get an initial drying where these are going to separate naturally as they dry out, to have a little bit of gap in between them. On the picket side or the outside, we do always have to have usually about 2 to 3 foot working lane in order to work from this side and nail our 2x4s and nail our pickets and use our tools and our nail guns. So speaking of having space, let's go check out this other side and what we had to deal with there. Another thing to note, I know we talked about the neighbors, that here it's a replacement, that they've got 4 neighbors that they share this with. But just a note, for advice and as a fence professional, please talk to your neighbors whenever you're going to replace your fence. You'd be surprised that when we show up and some neighbors don't have a clue that the fence is going to be torn down or what the plan is. And so that was not the case here, but just for my 2 cents, please talk to your neighbors whenever you're doing a fence project, especially replacing shared fences. Because really a lot of this is that we're talking about with the picket orientation and everything, is some of it's dictated, like we talked about, by the city, or things of, hey, we gotta have the finished side facing out for this roadway or this alleyway. But a lot of this, like here, is determined between you and your neighbor, and whose fence it is, or which fence got built first, and who has a preference on it. So anyway, long story short, it's just best to, as much as possible, work through that with your neighbors. Now here on this side, you can tell is different than the other 2 sides we just looked at. This is, again, is a dog ear, but here we have the pickets facing in. So this would be the picket side, or the finished side, is what we would refer to that to. But the reason being, and like we talked about having space to put pickets, one thing was, as you can see, all this growth and brush here, this whole thing was grown up to the back of the fence. And so in order for us to put pickets on that back side, there was going to have to be 2 or 3 feet of this cut back so that we could get in there, dig, set our post, and then most importantly, if we're putting the pickets back there, we'd need a couple feet to use our nail guns and nail these up. So that was one consideration of how to orient this. The other was up toward that end, which we can't see it right now, but the neighbor had a massive doghouse that was like a full-on structure, anchored in the ground, everything that was about 10 inches behind the back of this fence. So again, that posed an issue of trying to reverse these pickets, put them out and pass between the fence line and the doghouse, and then further they decided to just match that other run that has pickets facing in. So that's kind of the rhyme and the reason of this side being facing in and then the back and the other side facing out. So again, there's space issues of, hey, do I have clearance? Do I have the space to construct this the way that I need to? And to what's agreed upon between the neighbors, and then what's required with the city or HOA of, does this need to face in or out? But it's a great example of whenever our office or whoever you're working with calls and said, hey, do you want your pickets in? Hey, that's this right here. Or hey, do you want your pickets out? This is what you're going to see right here with your post, your 2x4s, seeing that backside. All right, so funny story. We were in Atlanta recently and I was with my kids. My daughter is 6 and we were walking outside the hotel room and there were a lot of paint markings on the side of the road in different colors. And she goes, Daddy, what are they digging for? I was like, digging for? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, all the utility markings. What are they digging for? I was like, oh, well, how do you know what that is? And so she's like, well, I've been out on job sites with you and you told me those were utility markings. And so I guess tell me your dad's a fence builder without telling me your dad's a fence builder. So anyway, would you have observed or noticed the utility markings on the ground? Here we've got the cable box. So this is, you can see on the flag, we got marked an AT&T. So there's an AT&T cable here. That's one of their pedestal boxes. This, as it's kind of aged, honestly, they didn't do a very good job burying it. There it is right there. As the paint's aged, it kind of looks reddish, but this is really an orange. So there's a color code to all of that. So communication, whether it's cable, internet, fiber, is going to be an orange marking. So these AT&T markings are going to be orange. And so to note here, this is a bit an interesting thing because you got one line running here and it runs from that box up here and goes all the way around over here. As you can see up above, they have power poles, so their electric is up above. So thankfully in those areas we don't have to worry about something being underground. But they've got this AT&T line that goes all the way back up to the house, but then also it jumps over and there's an additional line that ran behind the fence here. So we had to be real careful on putting this back in the same place to not disturb this line. And it goes through here on up and jumps over into the neighbor's yard. So just because you see markings up front or see something up toward the road, don't assume that there's not something else in the back. You always want to check, make sure that all of that gets marked. So as we're talking, so these, like the cable, the electricity, the water, the sewer, all of those are what are going to be considered public utilities. So the public utilities are going to be marked, and we would always call into it's Arkansas One Call to have those public utilities marked. But do be aware, there's always risk whenever you're digging, and there are also private utilities that those public utilities are not going to mark. So any sprinkler lines, any water lines that are between your meter and the house, any electric lines that go from a house to an outbuilding, septic lines, gas lines that go from a house to an outbuilding, those are going to be on your side of the property and will not be marked. So that's just something to keep in mind if you have any ancillary or private lines. And then here you can see the gas meter. This is a yellow paint. So the yellow is always your gas. So this is showing the gas line that runs from the meter up toward the road. And then here, as we talked, with the electric being overhead, it comes in from the pole, comes into the house, and comes into the meter. So there's no markings on the ground here. More and more common now is that the electric is underground, so either coming from a box up front or a box in the back, and then the electric would be marked in red. So we would expect to see some red paint coming in from either the front or back, wherever the box is, into the meter here for the electric. Then to run through the others, water would be blue paint, and then green would be like a sewer. So yeah, that's your run through of the utility lines and the markings and what to look for before you start digging on your property. Hey y'all, thanks for coming to check out this fence with us today. Make sure and like our video, it helps us a ton, and subscribe to our channel to follow along with more fences just like this.